So,
Hi Peggy, happy Sunday.
hello, happy Sunday,
You
Jamie.
are you are
How are you?
already Sunday evening.
Yes, happy Sunday evening and
It,
cheers.
cheers. It looks to me like you're drinking a mimosa again.
Yes, I am actually. Well, it's not with orange juice, it's now with vitamin juice, ACE. So
Oh, well, so it's healthy.
it's very healthy, exactly. And so that way I can take more Prosecco than juice because of all the vitamins in there.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Very good. Okay. So I'm just opening the Facebook thing. And yes, as a matter of fact, it is open and running. So I have an Aperol Spritz, which is one of my preferred aperitifs or pre-dinner drinks these days on a sunny afternoon. Unfortunately, I'm up here in the mountains and we've lost all the sun.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but I do love your red background there.
Well, thank you. You know, you have to get creative when you're on location, let's say,
Yes.
but it's working out.
Yeah, I have a new background as well.
Lovely, very nice, impressive clock behind you.
Yeah. And especially talking about fear today. I
Alligators.
have an alligator. I didn't catch it myself, of course, but
Okay, but he's over there looking over your shoulder, waiting for the right moment to ambush, huh?
it is. It is.
So talking about fears, I had an experience today. I'm currently road tripping across Europe with my son, and I have this fancy little sports car that I love. And he actually drove it up a mountain pass today with about
Oh.
83,000 curves. And at first I was sitting there going, "Oh my God, oh my God." And then I kind of got into it and I was like, "Okay, this is fun. This is so much better than going through a tunnel." And then I glanced down to the side and saw how it dropped off and I was like, take a deep breath, take a deep breath. But you know, it worked out. We got here, we had a great time, and what a nice memory to have.
Oh yeah, wonderful, cool. So the weather is good there, or
You know, today's the first day that it hasn't been great, but you know, you make the most of it.
yeah,
Yeah, have fun
exactly.
anyway. Yeah. And that's why, you know, we talked about it in the episode about facing fear is if you let fear get the better of you, you miss out on those types of opportunities, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and then I read something about how we have fear and what it really means, and that it's really actually in our mind, and that even though you look down, it doesn't mean that you're going to fall down there, but that's what we think. So that's what
Exactly.
keeps you then from having fun, because you worry about something that could happen but doesn't have to happen.
Hmm.
Yeah. So let's see who's joining us. Can you see who's joining us?
I'm just looking down at my phone here. I see Natalie. Natalie, you're on. You just traveled back from Mallorca to Germany yesterday. So nice to see you again already.
Hello.
And
Nice
Balzer.
meeting you.
Balzer is on. I see Jill on. Jill, how are things in
Oh,
California?
hello, Jill.
Waiting for her to answer, but it probably takes a moment. There's usually a delay
Yeah,
factor with comments.
cool. Yeah, so talking about fear, is there anything that you want to share now after the episode that we published last week? Something specific about how to overcome it? Do you have
You
any
know,
more
so it's
insights on it?
funny. Yeah, it's funny because I keep doing research on it. This is a topic that I think it's personally meaningful for me because I've seen how fear constrains me in what I do or how I can overcome fear and have more options and possibilities. It also it's a really, really kind of important current event because so many people are living with anxiety. And anxiety is, you know, it's a form of fear where we actually are kind of afraid of the fear itself and it becomes this downward spiral. And you know, with COVID-19 out there, with these huge forest fires in the US, with all of the political stuff going on, a lot of people are really suffering from fear these days. And so, you know, continuing to research and I think it starts with understanding, you know, what's going on when I start to feel this way, and then, you know, and then taking the steps to counteract that fear. But I know you've been doing some reading on it too. What have you seen, or what have you condensed as some of the most
Well, yeah,
important points?
it's actually just also because we've talked about that also in the episode, right? So because I was never a very brave person, so I'm the typical one, that the female that's scared of spiders. Even though, I mean, if I compare my body weight to a little spider, there is no real reason to be scared of this little thing because it has 8 legs, right? It's actually going to run
Mm-hmm.
away from me. But the thing is that what happens is that it's so not only the emotional part of it being scared, but it's also this physical part. And that to me was like I always feel when I get scared about like heights, or if a spider, or when I was horseback riding and the horse was going so fast and I got scared, it's like you lose power. That's what I thought, that what I realized really is that losing power, because you just like let go for the fear. And from the reading that I've done like the last week, is really to acknowledge that you have it, and to kind of accept it, and really look at it. That gives you, depends on how strong that fear is, but that does give you some power back once you are able to look at it, because just not acknowledging it actually makes it worse. So because then you,
Absolutely.
said before, you're afraid of the fear, and so you just try to avoid it, but then next time it's going to be even worse.
And that's the point, is the more that you avoid it, the more that you're training your brain that that's the right response to have, when you want to do exactly the opposite. What you just mentioned though, Peggy, this reminded me, one of the articles I was reading recently, somebody gave the advice, sit with your fear for 2 or 3 minutes. And I thought, that goes along with, your idea that you have to acknowledge it, you have to accept it. It's a normal thing. And then to really be a part of it. And say, okay, this is my fear. This is why I'm feeling it, and just live with it.
Yeah.
And then and that gives you the time to kind of calm down. And as we talked about in the episode, to, put the more mature part of your brain back in control, so that you can start thinking, about what steps can I take. But immediately trying to take steps without first accepting what you're feeling is going to be hard to do. So I kind of like that idea.
Yeah. And then, of course, there are also two ways of fears, right? So it's that irrational one. And then, of course, there is this fear that helps us to survive. So just like we should be afraid to jump off this 10th floor, right? So if we don't do that, then that could be deadly. But I think it's this, what is rational and what is irrational. And then in one of those research articles that I found, I really like that. I have to actually read that. I don't know if you saw it, is there's this guy, he was writing about a funny story he read in a Mickey Mouse magazine, where like Mickey kept dreaming about being chased by 3 evil creatures. And then he had this dream apparently every night, and he was really exhausted. And then he talked to Goofy. I really like that, because I used to love Mickey Mouse and Goofy. And then he said that, well, take a different approach. So when those figures start to chase you, then you should turn around and say, hey, listen, guys, I'm not feeling up to it tonight. And so why let's not do something else instead? And then he was playing cards like with them. So it's like what you said before. It's like, if you face it, if you sit down, that's why I was saying, when you sit down with it and think about it, and maybe even talk to it, then that can certainly help to look at it in a different way, and not in such a horrifying way.
Right. And so again, it's the concept of, addressing the fear and confronting it, and then, getting the better of it instead of letting it get the better of you. And I'm trying to remember, there's a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who's, an author and a poet from the US. And I think he was a US or UK, I'm not sure actually. And I think that he said something along, facing fear is the sure death of fear, or something along those lines, which I thought is very cool. And really, that's the only way to overcome fear, is by confronting it and dealing with it in a constructive way. It doesn't mean it's easy to do.
Of course not, because it really means you have to get out of your comfort zone. But what I also realized is, like, I had this fear of like walking alone at night in the dark. And it's just like thinking about it all the time, that, oh, you shouldn't walk out when it's dark. Make sure that you just have your car and you don't have to walk. Then a few weeks back, I had like this stupid argument, and I was really mad. And it was like in the middle of the night, like 2 a.m. And I was so upset and so mad that I was walking home actually. And then when I got home, it's like, did I really do this? And that time I was not at all afraid. And this is also kind of, maybe it's a funny example, but it means really that if you're not focusing so much on it and you're distracted by something else, then when you realize that, you can actually realize that the fear is just totally irrational. I think that's that's a very good way, if you are able to. Of course, we're not talking about those fears where you are like terrified and you need to see a psychologist. That's a total different story. But those regular, normal, like spider things that are not so, dangerous for you as far as from a medical point of view. I think looking at them and, like you said, sitting down with them can be a huge progress in making it go away.
Yeah, absolutely. There was something, I just had a thought while you were talking and now I lost it again. But maybe while I'm trying to come up with it again, Natalie, Jill, there are a few other people online. What are you guys scared of? Put it in your comments. I would love to hear what kinds of fears people are struggling with out there. Now tell us what's on your mind. Oh, the other thing. So here, I got it back again. A lot of people talk about, I wish that I was fearless. And actually, that would be a terrible way to be. And I think that's the other thing, that the other side of fear is recognizing that fear is a very important response to have as well. A lot of times, it keeps us safe in real life and death situations, right? As you said, it prevents us from jumping off of a 3-story balcony because we think that we can do it and survive, sure. Right? But it also keeps us safe in normal everyday situations, right? I mean, throwing away your job without having a plan of what to do next isn't necessarily a smart thing to do. And the fear of taking that step helps you to reevaluate it. And so I think it's important as well to acknowledge that we have fear for a good reason. In some cases, we need fear as an emotional response.
Yes, yeah.
And then the question is how do we use that constructively and deal with it effectively rather than letting it make all of the decisions for us?
Yeah, and I think that, like, well, it's the question of if people say that they want to be fearless, not to mix that up with being brave, because still a brave person can have fear, right? So like if I meet that lion out in the desert someplace, well, then I have to be smart and be brave, but I should still be, have some fear that he could eat me up, right? So,
yeah, right. Well, and that's like the quote that I shared from Mandela in the episode. Yeah. So, Becky, we have a comment here. Why do we develop more fears as we get older? For example, most kids don't have a fear of heights. And this is a really good question. And it's something that I've struggled with because I wasn't afraid of heights as a kid either. And my understanding as I've, researched this and dug into the psychology is that we don't necessarily have more fears as we get older in general, and they don't necessarily get stronger, with the one exception, fears of vulnerability. And any of those fears about vulnerability, whether it be heights or enclosed spaces or things that cause us to feel vulnerable, those do tend to increase with age, probably because we're coming to grips with the fact that we're not immortal. Kids don't see death, right? And the older that we get, the more that we acknowledge, I'm not going to live forever, ever. I can't overcome everything. And so those fears of vulnerability tend to become more important over time.
Yeah, and maybe it's also experience. I mean, then if you have experienced or you hear more things, like kids don't watch like creepy movies, or like they don't read the newspaper about all kinds of things. So maybe it's also about what we hear from others when we grow up. We hear so much about how dangerous life is and how many bad things can happen. And I think that could also increase that fear just from hearing it all around us, which is the same with COVID-19, right? We don't know how very much afraid we have to be, or we should be, but we are afraid because we are told all the time.
Well, I mean, you're right. We get indoctrinated with certain things, and that's not just around fears, but about all of our thinking, right? The biases that we're taught over our lifetime. Shoot, I just had another thought and now I lost it again. Maybe I drank too much alcohol.
Okay, then you know what? Let's drink another one because that helps.
Right. Yeah, happy hour, everybody, or morning mimosas.
Yeah, maybe we should ask what you guys are drinking for a pre-dinner cocktail right now. Is anyone
or morning or brunch drink right now,
or brunch drink?
So I think we were talking about why fears increase as you get as you get older. The other element that I think is an important one is our natural response tends to be exactly the wrong response with fear. We tend to avoid it. Yeah. And so things like the fear of heights, the more that I avoid it, the harder that, or the stronger that fear response becomes. And because, as humans, we're kind of weak individuals. human, we're very strong in some ways, but in other ways, we like to take the easy road in a lot of different facets of life. And the more that we turn away from the things that frighten us, the more frightening they become. And so I think that's the other element, particularly with these vulnerability fears. Now, if I'm afraid of enclosed spaces, and so I avoid tunnels and elevators and closets and all of that, it gets worse and worse. And as you said, you build up this anxiety that you're not only afraid of the thing, but you're afraid of the fear itself, right? And so, so the fear becomes greater, and the fear of that fear response, right? And then it just gets worse and worse.
It does get worse and worse, and it's this programming which is what I experienced when I was I fell off of my boyfriend's horse 4 years ago, and I really got hurt pretty badly, and then I couldn't go back, and of course because of my condition, and then I did want to go back, and then it was really it was programmed in my, because when I fell, and then I had this in my mind over the time, and then I was always thinking about how am I going to do this, and then once I was back on the horse, the emotion, the physical reaction was so much worse, and it was for me that the physical reaction took over. I didn't even expect it to be that bad. Mm-hmm. So, and I think this is, and there's a lot of that, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, he, with all his brain scans, and he does say a lot about that once our brain is like taking over, and our unconsciousness is taking over, and we have no control over it, and then it becomes like all your physical reaction as well, and it's not only your mind. And I think that's when it gets more difficult, and then you have to retrain yourself.
Absolutely.
And, like,
absolutely.
take those little steps. And
well, and I think that the more that you do that on a continual basis, the better you become at it. You know, my son had a scooter accident recently on one of these little motorcycle things, and was all, scraped up on one side. The next day, he was still in a lot of pain, but he got up and he got back on the scooter. And I remember looking and saying, oh my God, I'm so impressed that you could do that. And he goes, yeah, what else am I going to do? I want to be able to ride the damn thing. Yeah. And this is exactly the right attitude, right? And so Get up and go for it. And I said, well, were you nervous? And he says, I didn't think I was until I started going. And then I kind of felt tense. But then the more I went with it, the better it got. And then it was fine again. And I think that's important, that as we're facing those fears, we remember it's going to get better. I've done this before, and I know that I can do it, and it's going to get better. I just need to keep with it.
Yeah, and maybe it's that this brain, then it's like the conscious is taking over the unconscious when you just say, okay, I'm in control. And this is what I do like about like Dr. Joe. He said that in one workshop that I did. He said, like, you have to, again, horses, it seems to be my topic all the time. It's like he says, your unconscious has to be, you are the boss of it, right? So you have to sit like you're sitting on your horse, and you're in control. And then you have to do that with your brain, with just really knowing that you have the control over it, and not just let your unconscious take over you. And this is when you do that, like what your son did right away, to go back there, he's much more under control.
Right. So we have another comment here. I feel like we become less adaptable and able to change as we get older. So I'm wondering, we've got a few people on. Give me a thumbs up. Anybody who feels like you're becoming less adaptable to change as you get older, because I know I struggle with that. And this is, one of the topics that we have for down the road is, the threat of complacency. It's so easy to get comfortable. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Jill. As we get older and we become more and more comfortable, that step outside of your comfort zone becomes harder and harder to take, which is why it's so important to do it on occasion.
Yeah, because we look back and we say, I did all of this, I did this, and I don't have to, prove to myself that I can do this. And so, yeah, I totally agree. It's really much more work to get out of your comfort zone, because you certainly could sit back and say, yeah, it doesn't matter. I don't have to try and prove anything to myself, but it helps to do it.
I see some discussion in the group about anyone else developing more social anxiety after COVID. And wow, I've seen some thumbs up already. I've got a thumbs up. I was driving past a beach yesterday with my son in northern Italy, and we looked down at the beach and we saw hordes of people. Like, we're not going there.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I am literally afraid to be amongst groups of people in some cases because of the isolation that we've been in. And then it becomes more difficult. Again, how do I deal with groups of people, and how do I deal with strange people that I'm not used to. Again, for me, that's outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah, and then think of like the way we grew up, Jamie. I mean, we were used to that, you playing in groups with the kids and your school friends. And I just saw a post on Facebook actually a few weeks ago from a mother who showed signs from the kindergarten that they were showing like the little kids there, and that they like hugging was a big cross, dangerous and not dangerous. And then you think, okay, now actually, when we're talking about, how do we develop fear? So when you tell little kids already in kindergarten, they're going to grow up with a total different fear than we did, like a few years back. I'm not going to say how many.
But so the question for me is, how is it portrayed? Because you could develop a fear, or you could just develop a different social behavior, right?
Exactly.
Because back when I first came to Germany, people didn't hug each other in Germany. Right? You shook hands, which is still touching, but you didn't have as much closeness. And this is, with the kind of the second wave of COVID really hitting Southern Europe right now, one of the hypotheses is because there's so much more social interaction and so much more closeness, with lots of hugging and kissing and touching and groups of people. And so, changing social behaviors isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No, but
you're right. If it's done out of a if it's done with a feeling of fear, that's a little bit scary. I mean, we all need to learn how to live in this new world without fearing it.
Yeah, and fear has so many faces. It's like when I have this little Pomeranian, it's like this little dog, it's like only like this, and he can't really bite. But then there are children, because the mothers are scared of dogs, then they hold them back, and then they're even scared of a teeny weeny little dog. And so I think this is something that when you grow up with that as a fear that's already like taught to you when you're little, then it's a question, is that an irrational fear, or is it a fear that you were just brought up with?
Yeah, good.
It's another thing. They're hard to say. So how could someone that grows up with that fear because of bringing it up from parents who are already scared, how can you then, will you ever overcome it? Will you ever even think about it, or will you just leave it?
I think it's a choice, right? And it's like any other fear. And indoctrinated fear, you have to deal with the same way you would any other fear, right? Which is sitting with it, accepting it, understanding it. I think understanding is a big part of it. And then there's a lot of preparation, right? And I'll never forget, on one of my mountain climbs, we were going into our summit push on Aconcagua. And the day before we started, somebody died up there. Right. And so this news traveled through base camp. And then you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Yeah. And I was in tears. I was just falling apart, knowing that I'm about to head up to this place where somebody has just died. And what kind of saved me is the routine. When it was time to go, I started packing my stuff up. I started getting everything in order. And there were known steps I had to take. And by the time I went through all of these steps and procedures, I was like, well, I've done this before. I feel good here. I'm in a good place. And it helps you then to deal with that fear. And so understanding it and having steps in place and routines that you can follow to help you through the emotional response to get to the point where you can put a positive outlook on it. And I think that's the final thing that I would really say is positivity goes a long way.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And so looking at what's the worst that could happen and what are all the great things that could happen if I go through with this.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think we probably ought to close up, but before we go, any advice from people on the phone? What are the steps that you guys take to face fear and deal with fear? I would love to hear from a couple of other people. And if you're not on the phone right now and you're watching the replay, put it in the comments, because we would love to hear more from you.
Yeah, please put it in the comments. We're really, really interested. And also, if you have any other questions for next Sunday, when we are live again at 10 a.m. in the morning.
European time. European time.
Oh, European time.
Is it 10 or 11 European time?
It's 11.
11. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Perfect.
Sure. Yeah. I'm mixed up with UK time, with CET, BEST, whatever. So.
It keeps life interesting. And to the comment about staying adaptable, the more you deal with a changing environment and different time zones and stuff, the more adaptable you remain.
Yeah, we are very adaptable. That's why we travel around and have our live calls and from other places all the time.
Exactly. All right. I don't see any other comments coming in. I know it takes a few minutes, but I've got a dinner date with a hot guy in there, my son.
Okay, well, you better go, girl.
All right, everybody, have a great Sunday wherever you are.
Sunday.
We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining. Bye.